Hi, I'm at DOTD today with Mike Gorbaty, the Consultant Contract Services Manager, and we're talking about common mistakes on the 24102 form. So Mike, we're going to walk through some of the things that you see in the submissions on advertisements so that we can just point out to our consultants what they need to make sure they're aware of. So let's just start with the easy stuff. You've suggested make sure you read the advertisement.
Absolutely. That is the biggest, I think, issue that we've got is a lot of times people are just used to doing things the way they've done them in the past. They just grab the last one they did and just replace it with new information. There's some traps if you do it that way. You really should take each ad individually and read the ad from page 1 all the way to the last page. Make sure you fully understand it before you try to start putting your proposal together.
So what are some of the things you see that are easy enough, but when you have the evaluation team looking at it, when they first see a mistake, such as the contract title? Is this something you're seeing?
And once again, we're in a kind of a cut and paste world, and sometimes because of that, we see some problems that are easily corrected, but hate to have to go through the effort to get that done. If we just did it right the first time, things would go smoother. So if I could just
Sure.
bring this up to this is the DOTD form 24102, which is on our website. The current version is August 14th, 2019, and that is one of the issues right there, is sometimes people don't use the most recent version of the 24102, so consequently some of the information may not be where it's supposed to be or may not be there at all. So always go to the website, make sure you got the current version, and like I said, the current version now is August 14th, 2009. Some of the cut and paste type errors that we see are in these first 4 sections. Sometimes people will have the wrong contract title, the wrong contract numbers, even the wrong project numbers because they've cut and paste and they forgot to change those numbers.
Pulled up a previous form.
Pulled up a previous one, exactly. So we catch that when that happens, and we will send out a clarification to get y'all to correct it, or get the consultants to correct it. We would not deem anyone non-responsive for something like that. That's something that's easily corrected. So just make sure you got the correct version. Not only that you're using the correct version, but if you have any sub-consultants that are part of your team, you need to make sure, because you're responsible for them as well, make sure that they've used the right version and they have all the right information as well. Another thing down here in, let's see. Oh, before we get to that, APL is we have to, the consultant and the sub-consultants all have to submit with the proposal the APL, which is the annual personnel list. It's the prime consultant's responsibility to make sure that not only they submit the APL, but that all of their sub-consultants have also done that. That's something that should be easily done, but we have had some instances where that wasn't done, and unfortunately that may have deemed them to be non-responsive.
So that's a key point.
Yes, that's a
They're
big
not
one.
completing that accurately. That could deem you non-responsive.
Right. So just confirm that this is the right contract, the right project, things like that. Next one going down, probably section 10, which is information regarding DBE. Not all advertisements have a DBE goal, but when it does have a DBE goal, there are certain requirements that need to be met, and sometimes the consultants fall a little short on that. And this is something that may deem them non-responsive as well. One of the things that you need to do in section 10 of the 24102 is identify which sub-consultant is going to satisfy the DBE goal and what that percentage is that they're going to be doing. And we've had where some consultants, prime consultants, may have 2 or 3 sub-consultants that are all DBE firms that collectively will meet the goal. The goal is clearly identified on the advertisement, and then that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the DBE participation to make sure that it does in fact meet that goal.
Does each of the sub contractors that are each a DBE, do you have to show their percentages, or as long as they add up to the cumulative total of consultants?
Well, it would probably be best to go ahead and do the individual ones, and then you can put the cumulative amount as well. Okay?
Okay.
Now,
So,
and the reason why that's important, and let me go to this over here. I'm going to turn to one of this is a sample of an ad right here. And under the contract execution requirements article of the ad, where it addresses DBE, and here's where it's important. If I go down here, it clearly states that if the prime did not succeed in obtaining enough DBE participation to meet the goal, it must attach the DOTD Form 24102 behind Section 17, documentation of its good faith efforts to meet the goal. So, for example, if we have a 10% DBE goal and the consultant is unable to find any DBE participation, they have to tell us what steps, what efforts they took to go try and find DBE participation, but for whatever reason was unable to successfully locate it. That documentation has to be included in the proposal, and it should be placed in Section 17. Or if you don't meet all of the goal, let's say it's a 10% goal, for example, and your DBE participation adds up to 5%, well, you're still 5% short. You need to, once again, in Section 17, identify what efforts you took to try and reach the goal and what problems you were having. If you just ignore that, that may deem you non-responsive as well.
and so on the form where you have the line where you have to complete that, if it's 5% or it's the goal, or less than the goal, or 0%, do they need to mark, what do they need to put in that line?
What I would do is and let's go back to that. What I would do is, let's say we had a 10% goal, and whatever DBE participation you had only added up to say 5%, like we said. I would put on here, see Section 17 for explanation or whatever.
Okay. Do not just leave it blank.
Right, just don't leave it blank.
Okay, great.
Okay?
So we're going to go to Section 11, past performance rating category. That's an important evaluation criteria. So what do you see consultants sometimes do in Section 11?
In Section 11, and this is on the DOT 24102, and let me go to an ad example. Let's see, that would be this way. Excuse the scrolling. This would probably be quicker if I did it this way. Right there. Okay. Every ad identifies what the past performance rating categories are going to be, and this is where you would get the information to help prepare your consultant's Section 11 response. We identify the two-letter rating categories. For example, location survey is LC, road design RR, so forth and so on. And then we identify what we believe the percentage of the overall contract that effort is going to encompass. So, for example, location and survey on this particular ad, we believe that's going to be about 30% of the effort. One of the problems that we find here is this. What the consultant is to do when they complete this chart is if they are doing everything, if there are no sub-consultants involved, you don't even have to do this chart. You just say, I'm doing it myself. But if there are sub-consultants involved, you have to complete this chart. And what you have to show is what percentage of each firm is going to be doing location and survey.
Of the 30%.
Of the 30%. And the problem that we find is sometimes what they do is these numbers here, when you add them up, are supposed to add up to 100%, not 30%. So this is 100% of 30%. So sometimes we got to do.
So, for example, if you're going to use two other firms for survey, location survey, then you need to have 50% and 50% if they're going to handle that. Or the prime's going to do 10, the firm B is going to do 50, and firm C is going to do 40, so that you have 100%.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And then same thing is true with percentage of contract down here at the bottom. Let me move it up just a little bit. Percentage of contract is 100%. Well, when you add these up right here, everyone's participation, that should add up to 100%. And sometimes, believe it or not, it doesn't. sometimes, I remember one in particular that added up to 102%.
So if the firm B, in our example, firm B under location and survey is doing 50% of the 30%, then you need to calculate what that is of 100% of the full contract.
That's
so
correct.
then it would go down. So it's 50% up there, but it's going to be whatever that portion is of the overall project.
Right. And
It would not be the same two numbers.
That's correct. So, and just doing quick math, if
I'll
I
let
can,
you do the math.
50% of 30% would be 15%. So this is probably would be 15% here, unless they had some other effort down in here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But once again, this has to equal 100%, and so do these.
And failure to adequately fill out this form,
Clarification.
clarification required. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to section 12, which is the organizational chart. But what you want to highlight is that it's an organizational chart of the relevant personnel.
That's correct. And let me go there real quick. Okay, once again, off of the 24102, if I can just show kind of highlight the instructions here, and you've already mentioned it. It's an organizational chart showing all relevant prime and subconsultant personnel, and that's the two key words: is relevant and personnel. The way we view it is, and jump ahead for just a minute, when you go to section 13 of the 24102, that's identifying those individuals that meet the MPR, the minimum personnel requirements. To me, the MPRs is just getting you past go. Section 12 is really where the consultants are going to show us how they intend to solve whatever this engineering problem is that we have. So section 12 is very important. That's why we ask for the relevant personnel, and like I said, and personnel. We want people's names. We don't want things like supporting staff as a title. That doesn't mean anything to us. First of all, supporting staff wouldn't be relevant by definition anyway, but it's not names of individuals. And in this particular section, we do run into problems almost with every advertisement. And if I can just tell you what some of them are. First one is the org chart is going to have everybody's names. It's going to be one chart for the team, which includes both the prime consultant as well as sub-consultants. What we are finding in just about every ad, we are finding where there are people identified here as being a relevant person. However, there's been no resume attached to the proposal where we can find out what this person's experience is and what they're going to be doing. So that's, in those cases, once again, it's a clarification. We say, okay, we see that John Doe is relevant, but you
didn't attach the resume.
That's resume. Please send us the resume. So that's a big one. Another one is, once again, in section 13, where you identify the minimum personnel requirements. You have to identify those individuals by name. Well, if they're meeting the MPRs, you would think that they should be on this org chart. And sometimes they're not. So we, once again, with clarification, and that will typically get fixed very quickly. And once again, we don't want like organizations identified here. We want personnel identified by name. Then one other thing that's a problem, and I think it's getting to be less of a problem since I've been here, but it still crops up, is we're only going to evaluate, and we say it in the instructions here. Let me make sure I can find it. Let's see. Actually, it's not on this one. I think it's on this one. It might be further back, actually. We're only going to evaluate those personnel that are identified as relevant personnel. And then once again, assuming that the people who are identified as those people satisfying the MPRs will also be included on this chart. So if a consultant includes additional resumes of people who are not on this organizational chart, we don't look at them.
No matter how qualified and
competent, we don't look at them because they're not on the team.
In your mind, they're not on the team unless they're on the org chart.
On the org chart. So, that's one of the things we do when we meet with our project evaluation team, when we're giving them their instructions. We tell them if there are any resumes included in the proposal of individuals who are not identified as being either relevant or on the NPR, disregard it. So that's important to understand that.
All right, we'll move on to section 13. You note that we're moving on to section 13, where we need to make sure consultants identify the state where the PE license is registered, where the PE is registered. What are you finding in some submissions?
It's just a little bit. What we would like, and this really isn't that big of a problem, but where you identify, in particular, the PEs and their license numbers, we also would like you to identify the state that the license comes from. Because when you look at the NPRs, we are requiring Louisiana licenses, and we want to make sure that the licenses that are identified are in fact Louisiana licenses when the NPR requires that.
Okay. And also copies of certifications unless asked. You find firms are submitting certifications, it's not necessary.
That's correct. For example, with the PEs, we don't require them to submit their license to us. So unless there are any other types of if there are any types of certifications required, doesn't necessarily mean we want to have them in our hand. We just want you to understand that they are required to have those certifications, and if at some point in the future we think we need to look at them, we'll ask for them at that time. But you don't need to submit those with the proposal unless the advertisement specifically asks for it.
Okay. And then just to repeat that resumes that are attached that are not identified in the org chart will not be evaluated.
That's correct.
Okay. Section 14.
Well, a couple other things I want to show on section 13. I want to show it by going to the ad with regard to the NPRs, and the NPRs are always in attachment B to the advertisement. Okay, and the first thing is, this is typically what you would see would be something like this, where we say, for example, at least one professional land surveyor, what the requirements are. You got to remember, this is minimum personnel requirements. When we say at least one, we're looking for one or maybe two or whatever, but sometimes consultants will identify 5 or 10 people as meeting the NPR, which is really kind of overkill. At least one means at least one. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to identify 5 or 10.
If you really wanted to see 5 or 10, you would put
right
at least 10.
Right, and it's not that those people aren't important, because if those people are important and relevant to this particular project and they're going to be working on this project, they will be identified in the org chart, which means we're going to evaluate them anyway. But you don't necessarily have to have them on the NPR. And let's see, one other point I want to make on that is, down at the bottom. A lot of times you'll see qualifiers at the bottom of the NPRs. And what that means is, let me just kind of sort the implication is that every one of these individuals have to be a separate individual. So in this case, we would expect that there would be 11 individuals doing this particular effort. However,
because you've listed, just for those, you've listed 11 different personnel.
That's correct.
At least.
Right. However, what we will do, oftentimes, probably more times than not, we will say that some of these you can double up on, so you don't necessarily have to have a total of 11 people. For example, on this one here, you may be able to use just one person to satisfy NPRs 1 and 2. So you wouldn't need to necessarily have 2 people to satisfy that. One person can do it. Same thing is true with 4 and 5 and 6 and 7.
But just because someone could fulfill 1 and 2, if you have not in the advertisement said that that's what you will accept that as the same person. Just do not assume, if you're the firm, that I know Mike Gorbaty can fulfill both. If DOTD has not said they will accept that,
that's
then
right.
You don't make that assumption.
Yeah,
because they will be looking for those resumes in that org chart to meet that requirement.
So, for example, if you have Jane Doe identified as meeting NPRs 1 and 2, that's okay. But if you have her also identified as meeting NPR 3, well, then you got a problem, because we didn't say 1, 2, and 3. We just said 1 and 2. And where it becomes to be a real problem is if on that NPR number 3, you've only identified that one person, Jane Doe. Well, when I take Jane Doe out, there's nobody left satisfying that NPR.
So, okay.
So what we will do in those instances, that doesn't necessarily automatically make you non-responsive. What we will do is we will go back with the clarification and see if there's someone else on the team that you have already identified that can meet that NPR. And then if you had, for example, like I told you, a lot of times people will put 2 and 3 people on an NPR even though it only asks for 1. As long as you still have 1 still remaining, you're okay.
Okay. Section 14, this is about experience
Yeah.
contained in the resumes.
Yeah, and this is one that we've run into some problems with recently, and it's one thing that I really wanted to talk to you about today. And that is, you need to make sure that the experience that we are requesting is identified in the resume. For example, going back over here, let's see, let me go back there a second. Like here, we asked for a CE, or PE rather, with a minimum of 10 years of experience in roadway design. So over here in the resumes, you put Jane Doe once again, and you say that it's CE and PE, sorry, and with the licenses and things like that. And then when you go to their resume, let's see, where's that out real quick. Okay. The resume right here in 14, where we said 10 years, we don't mean 10 years with that firm. We mean 10 years experience doing whatever that function was. But what has happened, and it just happened just recently on one of the advertisements, even though the person who was identified was with the firm for 30 years doing this type of work, when they listed their projects, they only listed 7 years worth of projects. Well, that didn't meet the NPR because it required 10 years.
If someone is just using the last several years of experience, but the individual's experience goes back 30 years, you want to see 30 years of experience?
Not 30 years, I want to see at least
the 10, if that's the required.
Right.
So they may have 30, they may have 15, as long as they have 10, but they need to reflect those experience dates going back as far as you want.
As
If
the
you
NPR
only needed
requires.
5 years of experience, then the experience dates only need, and the projects only need to go back 5 years.
I'd go back 6 just
You'd
to make
go back
sure.
6, okay.
But like I said, in this one particular instance, even though we know that this person had 30 years worth of experience doing this particular work, they only showed projects going back 7 years, and the requirement was for 10.
And might that be deemed a non-responsive
Well,
applicant?
necessarily be deemed a non-responsive proposal as long as there was someone else that they had that could satisfy that.
But you might be hurting yourself if you don't
Right.
adequately
Because that
reflect
person
a
can't
person
produce.
with the experience, but you're not completing the form accurately to reflect that.
Right.
Again, you talked about if you're including resumes, but they're not identified in the org chart, then they're not going to be reviewed.
That's correct. And then once again, you don't have to worry about bringing or including any of the certifications. You don't need them unless we specifically ask for them.
So then we'll go to section 17.
Okay, section 17. This is the part of the 24102 where the consultants let us know how much outstanding work is still with DOTD and what the value of that work is. And the problem here is several actually. One is, and let me point out real quick, down here at the bottom where we've got the asterisk, it says round to the nearest dollar, do not round to the nearest thousands. Well, notwithstanding that statement there, some people will still round to the thousands, and that's going to require clarification because we don't know if they mean a really large number or a really small number. So just go with whatever the number is, round it to the nearest dollar. The other problem we have is math. We will add up all of the various project values just to confirm that it equals the total, and
It won't.
a lot of times it doesn't. So once again, that's just a clarification request where we go back and ask to clarify, what's wrong? Is it the numbers up here, or is it the number down there? But they don't add up right.
And if you have no balance but you have a project, you put 0.
Yeah, and please do that. Either NA,
Add that.
NA
Include the
or
project.
0. Give us something to know that you saw this and you put either 0 or NA there, that you didn't just overlook it. And that's how we know you didn't overlook it, by putting either an NA or a 0 in the total.
But you also say projects with 0 remaining balance should not be listed.
That's correct.
And you mentioned the total needs to be correct.
Right. And
And then QA/QC plans.
right. Let me go to that real quick, because QA/QC plan may be required at the time the proposal is submitted. And I'm going to show you where that's at real quick. There we go. Okay. I'll highlight this right here. If the project is not a bridge design project, only the selected consultant will have to submit a QA/QC plan to us for evaluation, and that will be done, like this says, within 10 business days of the award notification to the consultant. So when it's not a bridge design project, the QA/QC plan is not required to be submitted with the proposal, and is not a part of the evaluation. However, if it is a bridge design project, this is the applicable language. And what that says is if the scope of services that are identified as attachment A include bridge design, then the QA/QC plan must be a part of the DOTD Form 24102, and it will be a part of the evaluation.